Into the 1980s, we saw a lot of serial killers on the loose.
The whole concept of serial murder was relatively new. They were not common occurrences, especially around here, as they would become.
This series of killings changed the sense that the Connecticut River Valley was a peaceful and safe place. Once that's gone, you're never going to get that back.
In December 2005, 56-year-old Eileen Nicolau went into hiding after being attacked by her husband, Michael.
Eileen fled from Georgia and went to her sister's home in Tampa. Michael Nicolau tracked her down, loaded a guitar case full of guns, went to her sister's house.
On New Year's Eve, the enraged husband caught up with his wife.
I was here at the house with my sister Eileen. My niece walks in and her head's bowed down. I see Michael walking right behind her, wearing a trench coat. My sister looked at him and said, you know, what are you doing with a gun?
He forced Eileen and Eileen's daughter, Taryn Bowman, into a back bedroom, held them hostage.
I called the cops and I was scared. The police came and they took me around the block and we were waiting for the SWAT, and then we heard the shots. And he had shot my niece, my sister, and then he shot himself. This is the bullet hole where my sister was standing, and he shot her, and the bullet that went through her went through this armoire. It's a constant reminder of what we went through that day.
The killings might have been written off as simply a tragic domestic incident. But the next day, an article about the double murder-suicide caught the eye of private investigator Lynn Marie Carty.
I opened up the newspaper, and on the front page of the St. Petersburg Times on New Year's Day, 2006, I couldn't believe it. I saw his name, Michael Nicolau.
Nicolau was a Vietnam vet with a history of psychological problems and violence. For 4 years, Lynn Carty had been looking at Nicolau as a suspect in the disappearance of his previous wife, Michelle Ashley, who was reported missing from Holyoke, Massachusetts in 1988.
I just got this weird feeling, and I thought to myself, you know, I need to look. What other women had a problem of any kind near the time frame and a location that Michelle went missing?
Carty's investigation eventually led her to some startling conclusions related to a string of young women who were murdered during the 1980s, all in the same geographic area.
In the Connecticut River Valley, before the murders, was a typical New England area on the Connecticut River, encompassing parts of New Hampshire, parts of Vermont, filled with small towns. And people lived quiet, peaceful lives.
On May 30th, 1984, a 17-year-old girl disappeared from Claremont, New Hampshire.
Bernice Kudemarsh was last seen hitchhiking to a location in Newport, New Hampshire.
She was supposed to meet her boyfriend about 10 miles to the other side of Claremont. Never showed up in that location.
By the next day, her family had reported her as a missing person. At the time, it just seemed like a typical report of a 17-year-old girl missing.
That leaves a big void as to, you know, where did she go, who picked her up.
On July 20th, 1984, Ellen Freed became the second woman to disappear from Claremont.
Ellen Freed was talking on a public telephone at 2 o'clock in the morning. She witnessed a car passing by which was suspicious to her. In fact, she mentioned that suspicious car in the course of her telephone conversation.
She had driven to this public phone. That's where we last placed her. The car was found at one end of Claremont. It was locked. Some of her personal belongings were in the car.
With the disappearance of Ellen Freed, the law enforcement concerns were heightened. All of the surrounding law enforcement agencies, including into the state of Vermont, were actively investigating the whereabouts of these two victims.
These were young women with ties to the area. It just defied probability that two women would vanish like that. In a fairly confined period of time, I certainly was convinced that there was a problem there that had to be looked at.
On July 10th, 1985, 27-year-old Eva Morse vanished from the highway.
She was a single mom. She was on her way to Claremont from Charlestown. We had a witness who placed her on the road hitchhiking.
It was later that afternoon when her family and friends reported her as missing.
This was the third missing female that we had in less than 14 months. What are we missing? And what aren't we seeing? What is happening here in small town New Hampshire?
At the time, I thought maybe they had a serial case that was starting up in that area.
Coming up.
The bodies were not separated by a great distance. All of this was too much to just dismiss as coincidence.
In the mid-1980s, 3 young women, Bernice Kudermarsh, Ellen Freed, and Eva Morse, disappeared from the Connecticut River Valley. Without a viable explanation for why the women went missing, a wave of panic swept through the community.
All of a sudden, out of the blue, a number of young women go missing from this relatively small geographical area. Defies reason. What were the odds against this sort of thing happening in an area like this without there being some sort of outside force at work?
Well, now it's a year and a half after the first disappearance. The initial fear, bordering on terror, has subsided a little bit. And then the bodies begin to turn up.
On September 19th, 1985, a very significant event occurred. Ellen Freed's deceased body was found alongside the Sugar River. This is the general location of where Ellen Freed's body was found. Approximately 200 yards up there, in and amongst trees and some slight underbrush.
The fact that the killer dumped Freed's body near the banks of the Sugar River puzzled investigators.
They remember that she was last seen on the phone in Claremont, New Hampshire. Now the remains of her is found over in Newport, New Hampshire, probably 8 or 10 miles away.
During the course of the autopsy, there were certain indicators on the bones which may lead to the conclusion that she may have been stabbed.
On April 15th, 1986, a new victim surfaced in the Connecticut River Valley.
We got a call late in the afternoon of a homicide at the Moore residence.
It was the first really warm day of the spring. Linda Moore had been out sunning herself. She walked into her house, and clearly someone walked in behind her.
Linda Moore had been stabbed to death.
What I saw was a very vicious, hard-fought fight. Blood spatters and spray everywhere. I could see defensive wounds on her body, so I knew she put up a tough fight. We're talking multiple stab wounds. It was a gruesome and a vicious crime scene.
4 days later, another body turned up 30 miles away in Claremont, New Hampshire. The second of the 3 missing women had been discovered.
It was on April 19th of 1986 that hikers in the woods found the deceased body of Bernice Kudermarsh in this river, approximately 300 yards upstream.
Bernice had been missing for almost 2 years. Her body was found near the Sugar River, the exact same waterway where authorities discovered Ellen Freed's remains 7 months earlier. An autopsy revealed similarities between Kudermarsh's murder and the deaths of both Linda Moore and Ellen Freed.
We were able to establish a cause of death in that homicide, and it was a death that was caused by stab wounds.
6 days later, Eva Morse's body was found in West Unity, New Hampshire.
Eva had disappeared in July of 1985, and it was approximately 12 months later that her body was found in this location up on Dunham Road. There was a certain amount of decomposition that took place, but nevertheless we were able to render a cause of death, that of stab wounds.
At that point, I was totally convinced that there was a serial killer at work in the area.
The Eva Morse investigation renewed interest in another body found on the same parcel of land 5 years earlier.
Elizabeth Critchley's body was found here in August of 1981, approximately 300 yards in that direction off a small logging trail.
That was 2 bodies that had turned up in Unity. That was what brought Elizabeth Critchley's case into consideration as part of the Valley murders. Before that, she had been seen as an isolated victim.
Although police were unable to establish a cause of death, the circumstances of Elizabeth Critchley's murder fit a profile similar to the other women whose bodies turned up in the Connecticut River Valley.
All 4 were available and somewhat vulnerable.